Vikings are great, and Viking Pokemon are even better. You can take any mon you want and just slap a Viking filter on it. Instant upgrade. You take Nosepass.
Wow!
Hey everyone, I'm Jord, and today we're talking about Vikings. Now, unless you're an 11th century priest, you probably think Vikings are pretty neat. But what do they look like? The most common visual signifier we can use are their helmets, intricate runes and dragon boats. The last one I won't be touching today. Everyone, and I do mean everyone, has done some kind of dragon boat design by now, so that ship has sailed. I might revisit this idea in the distant future if I ever feel like I can meaningfully add to it. For now though, we'll be looking at the Vikings themselves. First Pokemon we're looking at today is Machop. The Vikings were pirates, and I wanted to really lean into the loot and plunder aspect of their design. I briefly considered mixing their design with my Golden Muck redesign, but I gave up on that idea pretty quickly. I usually start my design process from the top down. The first thing I did was figure out Machamp's face. The combs on the top of its head and the weird duck lips immediately reminded me of a Valgard, so I know I have to tie those together somehow. After that, I got to actually designing Machop, the little bastard. While I originally planned to make it bluish to tie its design to the cold weather of the north, it very quickly became clear that's not really going to work unless I make it an ice type. Plus it looked too similar to the original color scheme. I drew it pouncing forward to reference the original art of Machop, but instead of punching, it's grabbing, to show that it's a dark type now. At first I tried drawing it jumping forward with both hands, but it kinda looked like it's trying to go in for a hug, plus the pose was kind of awkward. So I gave it a little bag of coins instead. I took the colors for coins from Max design, but that ended up looking too saturated on the other mons, so in the end I ended up going for a different color. I also added markings around its eyes that looked like a burglar's mask, to further reinforce the idea that it's a dark type. Machop ended up being the last one I rendered. By the time I started working on it, I already cut my teeth on the other two, so I felt more confident, and I think it turned out the best in terms of rendering. I'm still not sure which generation's style I really want to emulate the most. The newer styles are kind of more tight and simple, but there's a sort of charm to the earlier generations too. And my own style naturally gravitates towards sort of more low contrast styles, and this sort of super tight style is not very intuitive for me.
Despite its size, Machop's strength is tremendous, and it uses it to break into barns, chicken coops, and even homes. And it always carries a small pouch of its ill-gotten gains. Trainers must work to change this Pokemon's temperament at an early stage, or it will become rowdy, insubordinate, if not harshly disciplined.
My initial attempts with Machoke came out looking too dynamic, or maybe a little too devious, to the point that it felt like it lost the massive power and bulk of the original design. I wanted it to look like it's getting away from its latest victims, so I drew it looking over its shoulder. A common design trope of Northerners and Berserkers is a bare chest with boots and gloves, but giving Pokemon real clothes looks weird unless it's a very specific application. So I leaned on Berserker's design for the body hair. I ended up reverting to the more static pose, and I gave him a short tunic, which I took from Pro's design. I'm pretty happy with how this guy turned out, all things considered. Machop has one design element I used to really hate as a kid. The weird muscle fibers growing out of its arms, which it loses when it evolves into Machamp. Now I think I like them a lot more, if only because I think the best way to approach a 3-stage evolution is to make the first stage small and charming, the middle stage awkward like a teenager, and the final stage fully grown, big and strong like an adult. I tried referencing the red muscle fibers in the final design by giving him red armbands, but I'm not entirely convinced with this decision.
When newly evolved, Machoke doesn't know their own strength and often cause more harm than they mean. They love nothing more than to fight other Machokes and bully smaller Pokemon, taking whatever they want from the loser.
Machamp's design process was complete chaos, if I'm being honest. For some reason I started out designing it like some kind of gladiator. I wanted Machamp to look like a Viking who just came back from his latest raid, flush with loot, celebrating. And I think I managed to achieve that relatively well. I was also getting to grips with recording myself drawing, which took a while, and that's why a lot of segments of footage are just missing or unusable. And it took me a while to really sort of hone in on what I wanted to look like. One thing I'm less happy with is the rendering style. Machamp was the first one of the trio I ended up painting, and the brush I used just gave it this sort of, I don't know, chalky texture, which I don't really like. I ended up switching to a different one for Machoke and Machop, and I think they turned out a lot better in that regard.
Less reckless than their previous evolutions, Machamp now knows how to pick fights that they know they will win. With an endless lust for battle and plunder, Machamps sometimes work together in small groups to launch brutal raids on other groups of Pokemon.
And that's that. The gang's all here. Now you might have noticed that the shiny colors look a little bit like Ganondorf. That's because I wanted to evoke a sort of Bronze Age primitive feel to them. And one of my friends suggested I should make them gingers to, again, evoke sort of a Viking northerner feel to it. Next up is Nosepass. Now the reason I chose this Pokemon is kind of stupid, but it works. I was thinking to myself, what sounds like the word Norse? Norse, 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 nose! Nosepass, Norsepass. Great! And just like that, I had an idea. Now, it's not like there's no precedent for this either. I mean, if you look at Cursula, Pokemon is no stranger to stupid wordplays like that, so it fits fine. For its visual design, I decided to rely on various statues of Norse gods. Initially, I wanted to make both evolutionary stages based on dwarves, but once I discovered the red cap look, I was kind of instantly captivated and I knew I have to go with it. So instead of being two dwarf passes, it's more like gnome pass and dwarf pass. I really wanted to give Nosepass these open staring eyes like that statue on the bottom left of Freyr, but it didn't really look like Nosepass, so that got dropped.
Nosepass is believed to hail from the polar region. Its nose is always frigid to the touch, and it can always innately sense the direction of the north, despite its body not being magnetic. Often slumbering for prolonged periods, many eccentrics use them to decorate their gardens.
The second stage was a lot more complicated. I knew I wanted to give it a beard made of ice, but beyond that I really had no idea how to approach it, and it took several tries before I found a look that I was even remotely happy with. I spent quite a while trying to figure out how I could fit the fairy motif into it, but it became clear that it's just not really gonna work. Pokemon's fairies are kind of too whimsical and friendly for what I was going for. I wanted something that's more evocative of the fury of winter, like the just mercilessness of nature, something very hostile and ancient. I also got really caught up on Nosepass as a helmet. For some reason I stuck a bunch of rivets on it, and then I spent quite a while trying to figure out how I can fit them into the look, and again it just didn't work. And once I reminded myself sort of that less is more, it became really easy to sort of streamline the design, make it look more correct, tighter.
Nosepass's body is so cold that it can freeze your breath before it even leaves your mouth. They spend their spare time idly floating on mountaintops and become aggressive if disturbed. Old myths claim their single eye is able to see into the future.
Alright, that's 5 designs done. Machop, Machoke, Machamp, Nosepass and Nosepass. As per usual, I got my friends together to react to these designs.
It looks like a little gnome. I like it.
What?
Congratulations, you've made it to the end. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, etc, etc. And if you have any ideas of your own of what I should draw next, feel free to comment down below. Bye bye.